One of the most intriguing, captivating, and alluring aspects of this idea of a lost world beneath the ice sheet in Antarctica is the idea that perhaps somewhere hope remains when in the modern world we live in, all hope has been lost. Over the last 3 years since the 2020 sniffles arrived, people have been drawn to escapism, whether it be video games or whether it be entertainment on Netflix or Hulu that deals with escaping reality. Shows like Game of Thrones, Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, the new incarnation of Game of Thrones, House of Dragon, all saw huge audiences while woke Hollywood had dumped a bunch of money into other things that absolutely fell flat. And they were stunned by what people were watching. And it's really put them in a bit of a bind. But what this is a very powerful psychological defense mechanism that the entire world has engaged in simultaneously. Last year about this time, over at the Florida Maquis Patreon channel, we started talking about psychological operations in offensive mode, meaning identifying those who are trying to get in your head and how can you do that back. Well, this year I think we're going to focus more on defensive psychological operations. What can you do to put walls up? What can you do to reinforce the parapets of your psychological castle? We'd love to have you over there. And thank you, by the way, to everyone who shows up here and there every single day. Those of you who stepped up at Patreon for the $1 per month, God bless every one of you. I very much appreciate it. You have made a huge difference in my life, more than you know. For those of you that haven't, it's only $1 per month. It's even less than that if you sign up for an entire year. Comes out to, I believe, $10 and some change. And it's fully refundable the first 90 days. No questions asked. We partner with Vimeo over there. It's a different server than Google, so they don't see the content. And believe me, down in the comments section, I'm sure you'll see people that say, yeah, Florida Maquis shows things that you'd never get away with here on YouTube for sure. So once again, it's the lowest allowable level over there. Would love to have you, but I think the idea of exploration, fifth largest continent, completely unexplored, that there might be stargates or something like that that you could step through to a new world and leave behind all of the crap and all of the garbage and all of the hopelessness of this world. This is defense mode. And it's not anything new. If you go back 100 years, they were designing giant vehicles. These were actually built. The Antarctic Snow Cruiser. It's basically a giant motorhome on steroids, for lack of a better term. 2 giant spare tires in the rear, huge wheels, plane mounted on the roof. You got a place inside where, there's bunks and kind of a common area, kitchen, storage. You got an engine room, control room, obviously a place to pilot the craft, huge fuel tanks. This is what they were dreaming of 100 years ago. Getting away. Even at that time. But escapism is a result of something much more sinister. What if I told you that we are prisoners? I'm sure a lot of you have already gotten this. But knowing it and combating it are two different things. Escapism is a mental diversion by means of entertainment or recreation as an escape from the perceived unpleasant or banal aspects of daily life. It can be also used as a term to define the actions people take to help relieve persistent feelings of depression or general sadness. I think that probably more applies. How many of you have caught yourself 2:30 in the morning scrolling and scrolling? Some people call it doom scrolling, or just scrolling through YouTube. And all of a sudden this really weird video out of nowhere pops up and you watch it. And you go down to the comments section and you'll see somebody say, hey, 3 o'clock in the morning at, in the middle of nowhere here, this video that has nothing to do with me pops up. It's really very strange. It's a form of Stockholm syndrome that we have been accustomed to the last 110 years. Now, why do I say 110 years? Well, 110 years ago, the U.S. government, for all intents and purposes, took the Constitution and turned it into a giant roll of toilet paper. Over the last couple of videos, a lot of people have been taken aback and said, wow, Florida Mucky, how can you believe in guns and have guns and own guns and not believe in the Second Amendment? Well, it's two different things. There were people that believed in being armed and being prepared long before the Second Amendment came around. You can go all the way back to Bible times. It's always been a good idea. It's always been good wisdom. But this idea of believing that there's some piece of paper that enshrines some God-given right to that, no, that's just kidding yourself. And if you'll give me 1 minute, let's see, what is it now? We're at the 6-minute mark. If you'll give me 1 minute, I can explain this. This is the 10th Amendment to the Constitution. The power is not delegated to the United States by this document, the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know what this means. Now, does it say the powers heretofore not delegated to the United States? No. See, a lot of people, when the Constitution was signed, they thought, well, okay, well, that's it. The powers at that point given to the federal government, that's all they had. Well, what do we know? What do we know to be true? Let's fast forward from 1789 to 1913. The 16th Amendment, the Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes on incomes from whatever source derived without apportionment, which means it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're a poor state or a rich state or poor man or rich man, among the several states and without regard to any census or enumeration. But wait a minute. I thought the 10th Amendment cut that off. Wait a minute. People can just assign new powers to the federal government? Well, yeah. They can by amending the Constitution. So if they amend the Constitution to grant themselves more powers, the 10th Amendment is of none effect. The 10th Amendment is of none effect. And if the 10th Amendment is of none effect, no amendment is of any effect. Because if they can simply just amend the Constitution to grant themselves power over your money and over your income, this means nothing. A lot of people love to say, shall not be infringed, shall not be infringed. Really? All they've got to do is determine how much money you make and what your cost of living is. And then whatever you have left over that you might possibly use on training or ammunition or weapons or anything like that, they can say, guess what? That's your income tax. That's how much you owe. Whatever you were planning on spending for weapons, we can just snap our fingers and we can tell you whatever your tax. It doesn't say anywhere that the taxes have to be fair, do they? They can take every extra dime you have. They can take dimes you don't have, to be very honest, and they have. So how do you think you have some kind of a right to anything when they have just given themselves a right to your income? The government gave itself a right to your income. And if this stands as part of the Constitution, no other right stands. It's over. Period. It's just over. I don't know how you... And this started a long time ago, this history of taxing people based on their income. Revenue Act of 1862. Revenue Act of 1864. Wilson-Gorman Tariff Act, which wouldn't have applied to 97% of the people. But then the Revenue Act of 1913. And this is where I came to my original number for about 110 years now? For about 110 years, the Constitution is toilet paper. Because the federal government arrogated through constitutional amendment unto itself the power to take anything they want from you. And now look what it says. Look at what they teach now. 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Any power not specifically given to the federal government. Well, let's look at that original Constitution versus now. Powers of the federal government. Raising and maintaining the armed forces. There was no provision for a standing army. No provision for a peacetime standing army in the original Constitution. Collecting taxes. There was no provision for that. Yes, to regulating commerce, coining and regulating money, and then handing it over to the Fed? Really? Handing it over to the Fed. Got it. Weights and measures. Establish a national bank. Really? Establishing a national bank. Oh, and of course, implied powers that are considered necessary and proper. You see, up here it says not specifically given, but down here it says implied powers, meaning not written down. The highest power in the land is the Constitution. This makes federal law the higher power. This was never the intention of the Founding Fathers. You know it, and I know it, and it's been dead for 110 years. You see, they can write this crap down all they want based on the 10th Amendment of the United States. The Constitution, states have general police power. Oh, really? Really? Try not paying your federal taxes and see if it's a state officer that comes to see you. Or is it going to be one of Biden's 86,000 new IRS agents? You see, a lot of people say this guy's, at least he's honest in this respect. Who remembers this going way, way back to June 23, 2021? Biden. Those who say the blood of patriots and, all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Quote, if you think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. Maybe they should amend the Constitution to say that. They could, because you can amend the Constitution to say no more liquor. And then you can amend 3 amendments later and say, oh, liquor's fine. The 19th and the 21st Amendment. If you can amend the Constitution to say and grant any power to any government you want to, no matter who's in charge, none of the amendments mean anything. And mark my words, now that the midterms are over, hang on, kids. We can ban assault weapons and high-capacity magazines in this country. Once again, I got that done when I was a senator. It passed. It was a law for the longest time, and it brought down these mass... whatever. We should do it again. See, he's got nothing to lose. See, he's got nothing to lose now. This is kind of the other nasty, I guess, opposite of a silver lining, what that would be. You see, when you beat this guy's been beaten up to the point of, being almost irrelevant as far as polls go, even in his own party. So now that he has nothing to lose, why let a crisis go to waste? Why let the crisis go to... What's going to happen? Is he going to sink further in the polls? Are people going to make fun of him? Are people going to say this and bad things about him and destroy his legacy? What does he have to lose by doing this? Nothing. He's got absolutely nothing to lose by pursuing it. And oh, by the way, this whole American exceptionalism and greatness thing, 1912... back when they decided to pass income taxes, when 90% of people didn't have a high school education. By that time, the country was already $2,868,373,874.16 in debt. Here's the USDebtClock.org. In 110 years, now it's 31,447,527,900 and so fast I can't keep counting, thousand. You get my point. And this kind of dovetails yesterday with what we were talking about with ancient Rome. Ancient Rome wasn't exactly a bastion of moral fortitude, but they weren't $31 trillion in debt when they collapsed. They didn't hold the world's oil hostage when they fell apart. You see, this is one of those hard truths that some folks can't really wrap their mind around. Because it's difficult, and it's complicated, and it's messy, and people don't like the idea. It's like, I thought I lived in the greatest nation in the world. I thought I lived in this wonderful place. You live in a very wealthy place. That's true. That's true. There's a lot of very nice prisons out there. There were You know, it was funny, in the military, we would occasionally have to detain folks, South America. And a lot of times our detention facilities were nicer than their homes. No lie. The things that they were afforded, folks that we had to detain, the privileges and the benefits that they got, the clean sheets, the bed, the 3 square meals a day, the shower, the soap, the shampoo, the toothpaste, all that kind of stuff, they were in heaven. They were in heaven. They absolutely adored it, even though they were guests of the U.S. federal government. Compared to what their life was out in the free world, giant air quotes, free world, they had quite a few more benefits. So it really explains a lot. It really does, this idea of wanting to take off to someplace unknown, start over again, live in the wild. Sometimes I wonder, you know, it's like, how long would people go before they missed indoor plumbing? You see, that's the craziest thing, and I know we're 16, 18 minutes in, probably nobody watching at this point. The idea of, you know, those times and those eras of Lord of the Rings and all of these different... Did you ever wonder? It's like you never see a bathroom. You never see any kind of facilities whatsoever where people would take a shower or people would bathe or anything like that. They, you know, you might see them go stand under. People love to watch Pirates of the Caribbean. Can you imagine the smell? Can you imagine the stench aboard a pirate ship, even after a week? Even after a week of baking out in that hot sun, no bathing. All the water is stored in barrels below decks, and it might be cool-ish. That's all the water you would have to drink. You'd be wearing the same clothes that you slept in, that you worked in, the same shoes, no socks. I mean, could you imagine? I mean, they might have had socks back then, but not likely. And people romanticize this idea of Renaissance Europe and this kind of fantasy land kind of stuff. But the reality is much different, and I think it goes right along with this idea that sometimes we tell ourselves lies that aren't true. And this is the biggest one I think we need to get over. Like I said, it is a really, really, really good idea to be armed while you still can be. And do everything you can to have as much weapons and ammunition as you think you might need. But don't anyone, please, delude yourself in thinking that there is some parchment piece of paper out there that you would march on DC and defend, or that you would stand up in the name of the founding father, all this crap. The Constitution gives people the ability to amend it. And people figured this out a long time ago. And they immediately got rid of this. Because once again, maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe I'm misreading this. If this says the powers not delegated to the United States by this Constitution, maybe it should say this Constitution and not the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states or reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. What do you think they meant by that? If it meant that you could just amend the Constitution to add powers to the federal government, well, they could just amend the Constitution to get rid of the second. They amended the Constitution with the 21st Amendment to get rid of the 19th. Why couldn't they do that to get rid of the second? If you can just amend the Constitution and say, now we have the power to take everybody's money at whatever rate we want to, under whatever terms we want to, no matter what. How in the world do you have any rights to anything? They could make sure they took enough money that you didn't have time to go exercise freedom of speech. Or you didn't have money to even participate in online discussions. Because, of course, what do we know? To participate on Twitter, to participate on YouTube, to participate at any, point on the internet, what do you have to have? What do you have to have? You have to have, number one, electricity to your house. Number two, you have to have internet service. And then you've got to have a device that can connect to the internet. And then you've got to pay, you got to pay for you got to pay for all this kind of stuff. Look at all the levels of things that you need that they could say, that they could interfere in to keep you from speaking, to keep you from arming yourself, to keep you from anything. Until this amendment goes away, the Constitution is nothing but chicken scratch toilet paper from 300 years ago. I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe. We'll see you guys next time.